If you guys didn't know this, last night before the game, Kevin Costner narrated a ad, PR kind of video for the NFL, which advertised the Pat Tillman Foundation. And there were four scholars or students who were recipients of the Pat Tillman Foundation funds who did the honorary coin toss ahead of the game. And there was a lot of mention about Pat Tillman and his service. Pat Tillman, if you don't know, was an Arizona Cardinals player who decided to walk away from a multi-million-dollar contract with the NFL to enlist in the military after 9/11. Pat Tillman was a hero. He also was a very intelligent, fascinating individual who was connected to the notion of service, but grew in his service increasingly anti-war, increasingly vocal about the Bush administration and the illegality of the wars, in his estimation, in Iraq, and then also just the brutality in Afghanistan where he served. And he was serving out the rest of his time in the line of duty and ended up being killed by friendly fire. That was conveniently left out of last night's advertisement in the Super Bowl. But here is an old video of Pat Tillman's brother, who also served with him. And the Tillman family has struggled to get the actual reality of what their relative, Pat Tillman, stood for into the ecosystem, in part because the machine of the NFL, of the military, and then at the time, the Bush administration, who was exploiting Tillman's memory for war propaganda purposes, it's been difficult to get who he was out there into the public consciousness because the efforts to suppress it have been so strong. But here's Pat Tillman's brother, Kevin, speaking about how the military has been covering up, or had covered up, the true nature of his brother's death.
The most recent investigation by the Department of Defense Inspector General and the Criminal Investigative Division of the Army concluded that the killing of Pat was, quote, an accident. The handling of the situation after the firefight were described as a compilation of, quote, missteps, inaccuracies, and errors in judgment, which created the perception of concealment. The soldier who shot Pat admitted in his sworn statement that just before he delivered the fatal burst from about 35 meters away, that he saw his target waving hands, but he decided to pull the trigger anyway. Such an act is not an accident. It's a clear violation of the rules of engagement. Writing up a field hospital report stating that Pat was, quote, transferred to intensive care unit for continued CPR after most of his head had been taken off by multiple 5.56 rounds is not misleading. Stating that a giant rectangle bruise covering his chest that sits exactly where the armor plate that protects you from bullets is being, quote, consistent with paddle marks is not misleading. These are deliberate and calculated lies. Writing a Silver Star Award before a single eyewitness account is taken is not a misstep. Falsifying soldier witness statements for a Silver Star is not a misstep. These are intentional falsehoods that meet the legal definition for fraud.
That's just an excerpt that was posted of his brother's. All good. That autoplay kills you. But that was just an excerpt of his testimony at the time. For people that might not remember, that Pat Tillman calling the war in Iraq, quote, fucking illegal, and wanting to meet with Noam Chomsky after his service was over was a very inconvenient set of facts for people like Ann Coulter, who called those facts a lie, even though it was Pat Tillman's mother who was the one who publicized that information and said it publicly. She called it a far left lie. As I mentioned earlier, Pat Tillman was an atheist. He again was very against the Iraq War, and it was when he died, the Bush administration wanted to use his death to continue selling the war on terror, which was becoming increasingly unpopular among the general public. And so the cover up of the friendly fire that killed him was a part of that, because Tillman was so public facing, NFL figure. The crossover between the NFL and the military is well documented. We had an all-female flyover for the game last night. And the fact, and like, I understand why they wanted Tillman to be included, because again, it was in Phoenix, right? The franchise that he played for. But everything else was a complete bastardization of what Pat Tillman stood for, and just another disturbing continuation of the bastardization of his memory.
And this is a project of the NFL. This is what they do when they see a opportunity to launder a potentially controversial or unsavory moment in their history. They seize it, and when they can't, like with what Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed wanted to do, they just make it go away.
Mm-hmm.
They obviate it, they obscure it, they shroud it until it doesn't exist or until you can't see it anymore. And they even did the similar thing with Michael Sam, the first openly gay player drafted to the NFL, that he basically didn't really have much of a career, and they couldn't make a feel-good story out of it. They couldn't print T-shirts to commemorate something that clearly wasn't supported by a lot of people in the league. They couldn't do that with Reed and
John Gruden's emails revealed mockery of it.
Yep. So that was not on board with either the owners or the higher ups or the nepotism cases that make up the NFL's strength class, I would say. So they couldn't do that with some more thorny, more complex issues, more difficult issues that might put them in a bad light. But they sure can launder jingoism, militarism, patriotism, and make that their own, and make stories that shouldn't necessarily be seen as happy endings or as stories of inspiration, some that might double as cautionary tales. They are very, very capable of flattening that in service of a nice 10-minute spot narrated by the
Kevin Costner.
by the Yellowstone guy.
Yeah, has a Fox show as well. Not a coincidence, in my opinion, that this airs on Fox. You kind of could feel Rupert Murdoch's fingerprints all over that, and we'll get to him sitting with Elon Musk in a second. But not all these are all, very pro-military networks, but Fox, it's a little bit extra. And this is not their opinion section, Fox News, but just understand this is part of the same umbrella. And I felt like you could see the heavy-handedness of it. And you could see, this is a part of the same company as Fox News pretty aggressively, more so than usual last night.
You know what I have to say to that, Emma?
What?
Cancel this.
Oh, God.
Did you notice the very prominent commercials for Gutfeld's evening show? Yeah. So,
yeah.